Hello, everybody, and welcome to our new webinar, Network Licensing Introduction and Configuration. I am Davide Mortillaro, Technical Support Specialist, and today here with me there's Salma Saidi, my colleague from Technical Support team as well. So today we're going to get into a little bit technical details regarding the network license, and we're going to see what network licensing is all about, and we're going to run a short demo for its configuration on a Windows system. So as usually, as in our webinar series, we want to build your up and ready knowledge so that you can set up your network license and running on your system. As always, the webinar will have two parts. One is the presentation that I will be presenting, and then the end we'll have a small question and answer session. So any question you may have, you can address at the end of the presentation, or you can always address through our chat box, and my colleague Salma here will be happy to answer them. So you can always find at the end of this presentation, we'll share this presentation with you, and you can always find our past events and past webinars at the link that is showed in this slide. And we are also planning a future webinar for October for each month up until next year. So let's get into the subject. So as most of you know, network license is basically a system where we have a set of computers in a network, which are the clients, so where the users actually use our software, that use a license that is located on a server, so a central machine. So it's generally a centralized system for license distribution and allows a number of users on the same network to share access to the product licenses. Usually on the server, we will have our network license manager. It's a tool that controls the distribution of a license to our users. And that allows a user who starts an Autodesk product to pull a license from the licensed server through the network. If a license in that case is available, let's say AutoCAD 2018, our license manager will assign a license to that user, to that computer, and the number of available licenses on that license server will be reduced by 1. Generally, when you exit the product, the license returns to the license manager. But at the same time, if you run multiple sessions, let's say of AutoCAD 2018, you're still consuming only 1 license. When the session is closed of AutoCAD, then the license is completely released. So for the license manager to work, generally we have a license file that usually contains all information of our licenses, the number of licenses we have available, and also the server information, because a specific license file will run only on your specific server. We'll see this in this slide. You'll see this is an example of license file, which is usually composed by a server line. So it's the first line in our license file, contains information about the machine that will run the license server. And in this example, we'll see that our server has as host name Nostromo, and as license ID or MAC address, this specific MAC address. So this is always specific for your server machine. After that, we will have the vendor line. This specifies the vendor daemon that is running on the license server and the port that that daemon is using. So this is very important because usually this port may be used by another program, and in that case, you're not able to reach the license server. So always make sure that this port is open. So the vendor daemon, again, it grants and denies client license requests and contains Autodesk authentication information. Then we'll have the package section or package block. In this case, this specifies by the feature code. You will see this feature code, ACD 2016, for example, will be our package. You specify the product, the version, and if any previous versions that are permitted to run using that same package license. This changes again according to the license that you have purchased. Then we'll have the increment section. In this case, this specifies the product that is licensed, the license type, the number of seats, and again, and also the serial number. You won't see here the serial number is usually coded, but in this case, it's at the beginning of this increment block. So once we have a license file, we need to choose our license server model. Now, this highly depends on the structure of your network. There are basically three different server models. We'll have the single server, the distributed server, and the redundant server. Usually the most simple is our single license server. In this case, we only have one server which serves several client machines. This is the most basic configuration available. The Network License Manager is installed on this one server, and license management is done only on one single location, this server. And on this server, we'll run, of course, our license file. So there are advantages and disadvantages for each model. For this model in particular, since all the license management takes place on one server, you have just one point of administration. So you just do everything from your license server, and it's the most simple to manage it because of this reason. And a disadvantage on the other hand would be that if this license server fails, all the licenses are not available. So client machines cannot pull the license from that specific server. Then we have our distributed license server, which is a different license server model. In this case, we'll have a set of servers. It can be 2, 3, or more, and each server will contain a unique license file that will include a portion of your total number of licenses. So let's say you have 10 AutoCAD licenses, 10 Revit licenses, 10 Inventor licenses. You can place each of them in a different server. So the advantage of this is that servers can be distributed across a wide area network, and they don't need to exist on the same subnet. If one server is in the distributed server pool and it fails, all the remaining licenses are still available. If you need to replace the server in this distributed model, you can just do that without rebuilding the entire license pool. So you don't need to require a new license file. So generally, server replacement here, it's easy when we are serving several machines. The disadvantage of it is that this model can require more time to configure because you need to set up each individual server in each subnet. Finally, we have a redundant license server. This model, basically you have 3 servers. All of them serve the same license pool. So for each server, you will have the entire license pool. In this case, the Network License Manager is installed on each server and can monitor and issue licenses as long as at least 2 of your 3 servers are functional. Another requirement for this would be that all 3 servers need to be residing in the same on the same network. The advantage of it here again is that if one of the 3 servers fails, all licenses are still available for the clients. A disadvantage is that if more than one server fails, no licenses are available. So it really depends on how many client machines you need to serve with your license pool and your network configuration. So once we have chosen our license server model, we just need to find our license information. So first of all, our server information. Generally, we just need the host name of our server. This can be easily achieved with this command line you see on Windows through the command prompt, and or Mac and Linux through the terminal, and the host ID as well, which will be the MAC address that is used by your server. Once we have this information, now we need to move to generate a network license file. So generally what we recommend is to generate a network license file directly from your Autodesk account. This is generally a better option since on your Autodesk account you can really choose the specific product that you want to include in your license file. If you have several seats for the same license, you can include all of them or part of them. It's really up to you how you want to make your license file. I will just show this proceeding. I included the link to guide you through this process. So you'll see in the Autodesk account, you can basically go to your product and service section and then open the product tab, and then you will have the option to generate a network license file. Once we click on that, we can proceed to choose our license server model, as we explained earlier. Enter our server information, server name and server ID, as we found before on our specific server. Again, for redundant server model, you need to enter information for each server, so host name and host ID. Same for distributed server model. One thing about distributed server model is that you can really select the number of seats or specific product that you want to include to each server, and the number of those seats as well. It's a really pretty straightforward procedure, so it has been included recently to our Autodesk account for a really guided procedure. Once we are set, we click Generate License File, and we'll be presented with the small window and our license file as a text format file. Again, license file is basically a text file, just a different extension will be .lic. Once here, you can decide to copy to clipboard the license information and create a text file yourself. You can download it directly as LIC file, or you can have it emailed directly to your network administrator or to yourself. Another option would be to request a network license file directly to our customer support. In that case, we'll just ask a few questions regarding your server, so we can create it for you. This could happen when you want to incorporate new licenses to your existing license file, and you're not sure how to proceed. In that case, feel free to open a ticket with us. So once we are ready with our license file, we can just move to our server, and we can proceed with the configuration. So what we need to do, I will briefly run a demo now on one of our machines to show you how to install and configure a network license manager. I'm going to run this test on a Windows machine, as it's like the most used platform. But I will include in this presentation as well instruction for configuration for Mac systems and Linux system. A few notes before we proceed. Always make sure that if you're running an Autodesk and version 2017 of our product, you install the latest version, which currently is 11.13.1.2. I will show you in a second where to download it. And of course, make sure always that your network client can connect to the server machine without any firewall preventing the connection or any other software using specific ports as we saw earlier, specifically 2080. So we run our demo now. Okay, let's pretend this is our server machine. So we just need to go on our AKN. You can just Google Autodesk Network License Manager. It's usually the first link. And from here, you can download for each system. So we go on Windows version. Make sure you're running your either a 64-bit or a 32-bit machine. In our case, it's 64. So we're on the download. Once it's done, we just run it. It's really a pretty straightforward process. It's all guided with our installation wizard. So while it's installing, in the meantime, we have retrieved our license file, which I've placed here on our desktop. Close the installation. I will see here we'll have our Network License Manager, also known as LN Tools utility. So we just need to run it, and then we'll see our user interface. And now it's a pretty straightforward process. We need to configure it first. So we go to Config Services, and we need to link these three files to our LM Tools. So first, we need to link our XZ file. This is our License Manager XZ. Usually we find it in our C Autodesk Network License Manager. This is where our LM Tools is installed. So we just need to browse it and link it. Then we need to link our license file. So we browse for it. We place it on our desktop. Go to our folder. You see our license.lic. We'll link it. And then one thing that usually this is a bit confusing, we need to link a debug log file. Now I get this question a lot. Where do I find my debug log file? Well, it's pretty straightforward. We just need to open our installation folder for our Network License Manager. So we go to C Autodesk Network License Manager, and we need to create a text file. So we go to New Text Document, and we call it debug.log. Now this is important. We need to make sure that we clear the txt extension from this file. So in this case, I have already this view enabled from Windows. We need to delete this extension. We will be asked if we're sure if we want to change it. Yes. So we have our debug.log file. We go back to LM Tools. We browse this file that we just created. That's our log. And we open it. We also need to make sure that these two options are selected. And then we make save service. Once this is done, we go to Start, Stop, Reread tab, and we start our server. We'll see a small message here, server starts successful. That means that it's running. To make sure, we go to server status, and we perform a status inquiry. And here we'll see our server status. We'll see our host name, which is running on our port 27000. And we are using the license file .lic. If we scroll down, we'll see that our licenses are available. We'll see here, for example, we have AutoCAD. There are a total of 5 licenses available, and none of them are used right now. So in this case, we have a package for AutoCAD. That means that we have 2018 version, 2017, and way back up to 2014. It's a common scenario in case you request a network license for your newly purchased AutoCAD. Another tab that is usually very useful is the System Settings tab. Here you will see your server information, which are the same as the one that we need for license file creation. So on a Windows system, since we have this user interface for Network License Manager, we can first install LM tools on our system, retrieve this information like hostname, our Ethernet address or host ID, and we can provide this when we create the new license file. And that's about it. Proceed with our presentation. One note needs to be made here is that we always recommend the network administrator of your company to always update the license server with the most recent version of the Network License Manager. There were some users who in the past were using the older version, 11.12. And when it came to update their AutoCAD, for example, from 2016 to 2017, it wouldn't work because 2017 versions need the latest version. So always make sure to update that. So we've been through this process already. And as said, you will find here also instruction on how to install and configure Network License Manager on macOS and Linux. One thing to be noted here is that we don't have a user interface for a Network License Manager on this system, so it all needs to be run through a terminal. There are very specific and detailed information and guide on this link, so in case you have trouble with that, follow those guides or just feel free to open a case with us and we can see this together. So regarding the license management itself, it's there are a few notes that we always highlight. Usually, when we set up a license server, we also may need to manage that license in a way that perhaps some user need one product more than another, or other user need to have their AutoCAD running also when they are back home and they are not in the network anymore. So with network license, we always have these options. We can always update our license file to include more product. So for example, we can combine a new license file or merge existing license file. And usually the Autodesk account allows you to do that. There are cases where this is not possible, like for example, you want to add a new license for AutoCAD with your existing license for AutoCAD. In that case, we may need to recreate completed license file. Also, we can have the option to borrow licenses. This, as I was saying before, allows user to borrow specific license from the server so that where they, when they are outside from the network, they can run the software on their machine. Usually, when we do this, we are temporarily removing a license from the network. And you can specify, of course, the borrowing period. Usually, it's not longer than 6 months. And in that case, the user can always use the software outside from the network. There's also a possibility to change the license assignment logic when via options file. So this option file, it's usually not required for a basic network management, but it can be useful if you want to control, for example, the license timeout or license borrowing. For example, you want to set a specific number of licenses that can be borrowed for AutoCAD. We can do this with an option file, or we can define user groups and reserving license for them, so that they always have a license available when they are in the network. So there are always way to, let's say, tweak our licensing pool so that we can change the license assignment. Another tool that we always recommend is our license parser. I will quickly show you. It's a small tool where you can upload your license file, and it will be read through this tool and will give an overview of your licenses, the number of seats that you have available, and which specific product you are using. Usually it's a bit difficult to read into the license file itself, as if since it is a text file with specific information in a specific format. Here you will be presented with the table with all the information of your license file. So when we are done on our server or servers, depending on the server models you have chosen, then we just need to go on our client machine and just install on software, and on forced launch we'll be presented with our Let's Get Started window. In this case, obviously we're going to choose user network license. We'll be asked to enter our host name, and then we'll just click done, and our program will be opened. You can always check your license information within the program. Usually you go from the About menu, Manage License. You will be presented with a small window that will indicate which server you are connected to, which license package you are pulling, and the serial number connected to your license. So this is the end of our presentation. It's time for our Q&A. As said, if you have any question, just feel free to drop it on our question box, and we'll be happy to answer it right away. Okay. One of our attendees is asking, why does the client need to specify the server model? How does he know? Again, this really depends on the network they are using. So usually when it's a small network, so let's say 5-10 computers, we have just one, we can use just one server. In that case, we can just go ahead with a single server model. We set up our network license manager on that server, we retrieve those information, and then we create a license file with it, and then we just need to manage our licenses through that specific server. Usually other models like redundant or distributed are used for very large companies or organization which perhaps are located in different locations, different countries. So they need to have different server set up and different clients that can connect to just one server. So that would be a solution. So it really depends on the number of users and the size of your network. Okay, another user is asking, what is the maximum users for a multi-license? Okay, for multi-license, I suppose we are talking about multi-seat license. This can be like any number of users. Usually we have organizations who have thousands of users, thousands of seats in their license file. Let's just think about education institutions. They need to have a lot of licenses for the students, who are usually in the thousands. So it's really there is really no limit for that. Another user is asking if there is a possibility to avoid the LGS dialog when the new user starts the software for the first time. Yes, there is. In this case, we need to set up before the client machines with the system variable. With the system variable, we're basically saying the client machine to just go to that specific server and look for the license in that server. I'm going to write you down the license variable. This is very let's say wide subject. There are several tweaks how to connect directly to a server, but this is the most common, the most reliable. This is usually done by recommend an IT administrator to do this, as it needs to be done as administrator in the specific client machine. Okay, another user is asking if we have a license code for 10 assets of a product like AutoCAD and we acquire far more assets, we receive a new package line with 5 assets, or do we receive the package with 15 licenses? Can the license manager have 2 different set of licenses for the same product? In this case, it really depends what server model you're using and if whether or not you want to separate those licenses in different server models. Usually, if you're using a single server model, you can request a new license file. It will be updated because when you request the same product, let's say, for example, you have those 10 AutoCAD and then you buy more AutoCAD licenses. So in total, you have 15, but you still have that old license file. In this case, you cannot just include the new AutoCAD license into your old license file. This is caused by the fact that license of the same product need to have all the same issue date. So in this case, you will need to generate a new license file. Usually, you can either do it from our Autodesk account, or you can ask one of our colleagues from the support team to generate it for you. Okay, this is a pretty common question. Why is the license model pulling a rented collection prior to a purchase out AutoCAD? We get this question a lot, and usually it's due by the cascading logic. So generally, when you have a collection and you open AutoCAD, usually the collection license is always consumed first. This is used by the cascading logic that it cannot be really modified. In this case, we recommend, if you have several users, to separate those user group. So one would use only the collection licenses, and the other user will use the rest of AutoCAD licenses. In this case, you will differentiate those 2 users, and you will avoid overlapping usage of the same product. One note regarding the system variable. I see one of our users already suggested how to set it up. So basically, it's the system variable, and then the value of that variable would be the port of your firewall and then the host name. You can set up different server on this same variable. When you do that, you don't need to specify the host name in the LGS window when you start the product for the first time. Okay, get new question. Is it possible to arrange cascading between multiple license servers? It really depends on what do you want to arrange with the cascading, because usually when they have a server, a multiple license server, we still have the same license pool. So we cannot say we need these license from this server being pulled before this other server if we have a distributed or redundant server model. License pool is always the same, whether or not we are using a single server, 2 server, 3 server, whether or not they are redundant or multiple. So cascading applies always to the same pool. So in this case, it cannot be changed. It can be tweaked, let's say with an option file. So we can say this user only uses this license, but we cannot say we need to pull this license before this other one for all users. Okay, so just last question, and we'll wrap it up. What is the difference to use TCP port 27000 and 2080 for client? Good question. Usually for the client, we just need to use 2080 when we set up a system variable. So we just always make sure that the client is using that port. Is it possible to change that port from the license file, but we need to make sure that it's usually not recommended, because Flexera, who develop Alum tools, suggested to use 2080. So thank you for attending this webinar. So stay tuned for the next ones. They are coming in October and in the upcoming months. As always, you will receive our follow-up mail after this webinar with a link to the PowerPoint presentation. And thank you all, and have a nice day.